Hello to everyone and welcome. My name is Carly McBride and I'm the Marketing Program Manager at the National Restaurant Association. I'll be your host for today's webinar presented to you by the National Restaurant Association and our partner Sprocket. I'm happy to introduce Chad Troutman, Chief Marketing Officer for Sprocket, and also joining us today is Chad Langston, District Manager and Operations Manager of Zaxby's in Gainesville, Georgia. For today's presentation, Chad will discuss some insights around restaurant recruitment and retention. Before we get started, let's go over a few housekeeping items. Today's session is a bit shorter, so about 20 to 25 minutes long, with approximately 5 minutes for questions at the end. To ask a question, simply submit it to the purple Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. We'll address your questions at the end of the presentation and get through as many as time permits. Today's webinar is being recorded. You will receive an email with a link to the on-demand presentation where you can rewatch or share with a colleague. And at the end of today's session, you'll be prompted to provide your feedback in a short survey. Please take 1 minute to complete the survey as it provides us with valuable information regarding your thoughts on the presentation and how we can produce more great content for you in the future. And with that, Mr. Troutman, I will hand it over to you to get us started.
Perfect. Thank you, Carly. And thank you, everybody that was able to make it to this education session today, specifically around hiring for fit and its impact on increasing employee retention, in particular in the hourly workforce. But we will be talking about all of our employees or thinking about all of our employees in this. But I know right now that's the acute thing that a lot of folks are looking at. But before we dive into the material, I'd love to give a little bit more background on myself as well as the other Chad, or Chad number 2 or Chad number 1, whichever one. We never hashed that out, which one of us was number 1, but we'll figure it out by the end. That's also going to be joining us today. So for myself, I am the Chief Marketing Officer here at Sprocket, which is a tech company in the food service space. But I like to start off these kind of moments to give some other background beyond just tech, so that you know that I am speaking from a place where I've been in these shoes before, and that is the fact that I grew up in food service. My family owned A&Ws back in the day, as well as not only working my way through college, but I was a GM for Papa John's. So I have been in the broom closet, flipping through paper applications, trying to find that next person that was going to be on my staff. So I'll use that experience today. But somebody that is living it and breathing it right this moment is Mr. Langston here, and I'd love for him to give a quick background on himself. So Chad, if you just let everybody know a little bit more about yourself.
Yes, absolutely. Hello, my name is Chad Langston. I'm currently with Zaxby's, but I've been in the restaurant industry since I was 15, so it's been a long time. I've worked my way from cashier all the way up to where I'm at now, with the intentions to owning 1 or 2 Zaxby's myself. And in the entire time that I've been in the restaurant industry, hiring has always been a key thing to being successful. How to hire has always been the question that people have looked for an answer for. So I've seen it all from way too many employees out there to, well, everyone knows right now. It's to find them, and when you do, you want to make sure it's the right one.
Absolutely, absolutely. So yeah, we'll get right into that. With looking at kind of starting off with anything, an acknowledgement of kind of the current state of affairs. So, the current state of things is the average hiring process that I come across in the restaurant space is still very much like how my grandmother did it in the 70s and 80s. And earlier than that, I'm sure. So maybe not getting those decades right, but it's been around for a while. We're still looking at a piece of paper, looking at the person, asking some questions, reading the tea leaves, and hoping that we got it right. Not unlike dating. So maybe not the piece of paper part, but definitely on both sides trying to figure one another out and see if it's the right fit. and we don't always get that right. And the National Restaurant Association does take the time to really dive into this data, and year in and year out, present it back to us. And unfortunately, for quite some time, I see the numbers being very stagnant when it comes to turnover, which is just the unfun way of putting retention, and or I see it going up into the right, which is never what we want. So you add that into the acute part of things with us having to replace individuals right now that have moved on maybe to another industry, and that just compounds an already troublesome process that we've had. And we know we're trying to fill existing positions, but something that's not on here that I see a lot of our users coming in with right now during this, again, this acute part of things, is a retention rate, that a 60 to 90 day retention rate that's anywhere between, well, some are abysmal, but I'll go with average. The average is somewhere between 65 and 75%, which for easy math is saying, even with the applicant pool we have right now, which we know it's a tough applicant pool, if we have 4 people that we hire from that applicant pool, we know one of them is going to be termed within 60 to 90 days. So that's a lot of operational drag on a business, and everything we can do to push that metric up, have somebody make it past the 90-day point, the better. Because we also have very encouraging data that if we can retain an employee longer than 90 days, there is a moment of loyalty that does occur where it stops being just a job and starts to become a little bit more of their routine, of their life, and something that they're loyal to. So we'll talk about ways to get to this critical point, this 90-day point, because we know the metrics get standing at that point. So that's the line in the sand that we'll be working to today. But this is a little bit more about, again, what we're facing. So then how do we face it? Looking at this is a very simple way of putting things, but hire employees with shared values. We've got a myriad of folks that use Sprockets, and Chick-fil-A being one of them. And this is something that when I get to work with these users, you hear all about. I'm sure Chad will talk to us a lot about Zaxby as that same kind of brand, looking to hire people with shared values. But for me, it's the why. Like, why is shared values important? Like, why does it matter if we, have this culture of winning and we believe that's important, or have this team dynamic? And it's because most folks that I saw leaving and quitting, either quitting on day one, quitting in, the first week of their shifts, did not last over the 90 days. The ones that I could tell were right for the role, like had the ability, had the skill set, had the desire, but still left, were the ones that didn't like who they worked with. God forbid we work in a place where it's harmonious. And this becomes an even bigger thing when we look at like replacing the workforce that has left during the pandemic and has moved on to other industries. We're replacing them with folks that are coming out of high school. We're replacing them with the Gen Zers. And I can assure you, this is a very, 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 very important thing to them. Like the 80s and 90s of the money being the most important thing, like it's a job to build experience to get on to the next thing. That's not their first thing on the list. Their first thing is, yes, I'm going to have a job, but I'm going to have a job where I like the people that I work with. And you get this culture question. You get this, like, what is it like to be here question. And they don't just mean literally the process. So the why here is because of who we're going to be recruiting. It becomes even more. It's not just a brand thing. It's a sourcing thing here. We're going to get asked this question. So being able to quantify it for somebody of why they're going to fit in, why they're going to feel good there, why it's going to be a good environment for them, and why they're going to get along with folks is an important thing to articulate. So you have to have an understanding at a location level what that looks like, sort of thing. But again, I have to impress upon everybody that this is something that, also just logically makes sense. Nobody wants to work with folks that they don't like, that they don't get along with, that they don't have commonality with in some way so that they can relate to each other and be a team. So with that, I want to turn it over to Chad. I know Zaxby's puts a major emphasis on this, so I'm really interested to hear kind of some of the ways that y'all look for that fit, some ways that you got to kind of find it out and quantify this or explain this to others as they're applying.
So yeah, this is something that we've kind of always had in our culture, just never really had the before you bring them in for the interview opportunity. It was always after the interview, hey, fill this out, see where you're at. Because they always say people quit because of leadership, which is partially true. But people also quit because of people, just like you said, Chad. So we have always tried to figure out a personality profile, try to figure out, we've used all the calorics and sanguines and all this other stuff, and it's so convoluted. And you've already wasted your time meeting tons of people to try to understand who they are and if they meet with the team that you have developed in your store already. So using what Sprockets has provided for us has opened that insight to where, and I love the question, like the questions they ask too. It's so simple, but it's made it to where we now know really without having to do any legwork who we're going to be interviewing. Do they match our top people that come in every day, have a smile on their face, and when they have a bad day, it's a blip on the radar even when they're at work. And those are the kind of people that are, they're guest focused. They're what we want in our locations, enough to where I've got one location that is kind of like the staple of what we want in all of our stores. And when people come on, that we bring on our teams that meet those personality profiles of those top performing people we have, they seem to not be hired as just another employee. It's more like we just brought their friend in off the street. And then when they do, like you said, make it past 90 days, they're no longer friends. It's like it's like they're a family. They're talking about all kinds of stuff that it's still work getting done, but you would think that you're at a family reunion almost every day. It's just crazy. They buy each other this and do this. And when someone's sick, they know what to get them. And I mean, it's just amazing the culture that it develops when you do that, when you focus on hiring what fits your team and the culture you're trying to develop in your team based on who you already know and have and really are your success stories.
Yeah, and I love how the last part, one of the last things that you said, talking about like how a culture develops. You will see it here in a few bullet points going to, we have it labeled as create a positive workplace culture. And I always think that's funny because you don't really create it. It is something that develops. You create it by influencing who you bring in. So asking good behavioral questions. And I think another brand that I've seen that gets to the shared values and figures it out, even if you don't have maybe the benefit of technology, is Starbucks. I know they publish all of their behavioral questions out there. And it's still reading the tea leaves. It's still some trial and error, but it is something that I'm hearing more and more hiring managers, DMs, GMs, and just brands in general going, okay, let us quantify our shared values, actually talk to our teammates, talk about what's important to us as individuals and try to see the commonality in there so it can be shared to somebody else, not just some kind of, generic thing of like, hey, you'll like to work here. Like we all get along. It's like, well, why? Like, why, what do we share again in common? So, and this kind of goes to then attitude, hiring for attitude. This is an energy begets energy kind of thing. I think this is one of those shared values that supercharges a team when you have energetic folks that understand that by being energetic, they're going to feed off of others. So I hear a lot of folks, and this is something that I always tried to hire for, is I'd rather take somebody that was almost like obnoxiously bubbly and like over the top and like almost like I think of somebody that, I mean, I'm definitely stereotyping here when I say like Glee Club or almost like in your face cheerleader kind of thing. Like they're just really super excited kind of individuals. That's something that I just got to teach them how to do the job. But if I have that attitude, I can have something infectious in the building that energy is going to beget more energy. And I think when we think about hiring for attitude, we think about hiring for attitude from that person to the customer, and don't always quantify it again back to how are they interacting with their colleagues, with their teammates. If they have that same attitude towards them, and not even just towards their work, but just towards the other people that they work with, the work will be fine. The actual things that we do, I mean, work still work. Like, this is a dirty job. It's greasy. I mean, I went home with just sawmeal all over my clothes and in my fingernails and in my shoes, and having to take a 30-minute shower is what it felt like to get the whole day off of all the things that I picked up in making pies all day or making pizzas all day. So that can be taught, but like, again, seeing that individual, seeing the energy that they bring in an interview and pulling that out of them, because it takes the interviewer to let somebody feel comfortable with that. If we show energy in an interview, we have the right attitude that we're wanting to see in the restaurant, that's what we're going to start to see that mirrored from us. If we have a serious interview, you're going to get a serious response from folks, and you're not going to see what their real attitude is. So I think hiring for attitude, we already know that. It's like, how do you do it? You've got to open up the space for somebody. You've got to bring it yourself a little bit, and you're going to get that back from them and see if they have that capacity. If I start sounding like this, sound passionate about what we do and who we serve and what we're about, and then that person doesn't mirror and match that might be what I get on the floor every day. It may be not, but that's an early indication of what I might get. So when I'm thinking about hiring for attitude, that's how I think about it. Chad, how do you guys over at Zaxby's or with your locations, how are you guys thinking about hiring for attitude?
So yeah, hiring for attitude is one of the things where we actually kind of do what you said, especially when I interview people. I mean, I interview a lot of GMs, AMs here and there, and I make it a conversation instead of a bullet point 1, bullet point 2, bullet point 3. Do they know this? I let them tell on themselves in a good way, by getting them comfortable to where they open up. You get to see who they really are, and the knowledge, all the questions that you had get answered, but from the person that you're interviewing instead of the scripted list of answers that they may have already had prepared. And then you get that if they're bubbly, they're going to come out bubbly when you try to make a joke. Or they'll try to make a joke on their own, and you'll see if they're just a jokester person, or if there's someone that's sarcastic, or if there's someone that just genuinely is comfortable with a stranger when they just walk in the door. So I kind of more let them lead the conversation, and I kind of input here and there just to really feel them out, because that's hard to get the real attitude of somebody face to face that doesn't know you and you don't know them. You're not going to get it from a script.
Absolutely. I definitely agree with that. And there's a lot of times where I've seen, and I fell victim to it as well. I didn't get any real training on how to hire at Papa John's. Like, I won the war of attrition. I started out as a crew member. Then I was a shift lead, assistant GM, then GM, all because the person above me was no longer in that position. So by the time I got to do hiring, I was given a list of things to ask, and boxes to check. I mean, I had to develop into how I eventually made it my own. But, so often we're putting our hiring managers in this position to check boxes instead of like having a conversation with folks. So I am going to jump over one quick thing just for timing, seeing we're already at 19 minutes in, 20 minutes in, because creating a positive workforce culture, this is another one of those, yeah, Chad, thanks for bringing me in for this education session to tell me this. Everybody knows we're supposed to do this, and I don't feel like I have any control over it. And you're kind of right. Your control is limited to who you bring in and what you bring in every day. And we're already kind of been talking about this energy, begetting energy, opening up the interview to be a conversation, not to be a series of checking boxes. So I feel comfortable with jumping over this one real quick, not to miss out on this one. Focusing on coachability, not a resume or an application or anything like that, especially because right now with a Gen Zer coming in and we're hiring somebody with no previous work experience, how the heck are you don't even have a resume or an application of any depth to rely on. So I hear this more and more, and this is where I think that this is a great loyalty retention moment that allows you to hire for fit and get a quick loyalty moment. And that is, right now, people are shopping for a job, and they are in the driver's seat. They know they're in the driver's seat. They know that there's more demand than there are people. So one of the things that they're looking for is instant gratification, especially the Gen Zers, but honestly, everybody. We're on that Amazon sort of mentality of when I order something from them, they immediately email me and tell me what I ordered, like I just forgot or something. So same thing with these folks. What I'm getting to is this loyalty moment of immediately getting to somebody and then saying, like, we'd like to bring you in as soon as you can come in to have a live interview. Like, we want you to come in and experience the restaurant, be here on the floor with us, shadow some folks that you're going to work with, and get to see who you'll work with, see the job in real time, and we're going to pay you to come in that day. You know, it's a live interview, and I'm seeing more and more of our users doing this. And what happens is a couple of things. One, you stick out from the crowd on a sourcing standpoint. It's like, okay, so you're telling me that I can come in, see what it's all about, like, you know, not have any smoke and mirrors that can happen in the interview process, be paid to be there, and you're the first one that's also telling me this and getting back to me quickly about things. It's a moment where, again, you stick out from the crowd from sourcing, but from the retention standpoint, you're going to get to see the coachability. You're going to get to see the interaction moments. You're going to hear the questions that they ask, how they interact, and go beyond that resume and giving these folks an opportunity to be hands-on. Like, you can think about like the education that most people are coming through now, like how the education system's changed. We know that being hands-on, being more than just being told about something, but actually doing something and having your hands around it is how they're coming up, how they're being taught. That's rolling that into the interview process. Not only is good for them, but it's great for you and creates, again, these early loyalty moments. And I say loyalty because I'm a loyal Papa John's customer to this day. I'll never have, and I hope nobody's on the line from here, I'll never eat Pizza Hut again. And that's because I had a really bad experience at Pizza Hut and totally hold it against them since then. Same thing with Papa John's. I had a great experience with them and loved their pizza and still go with them. This whole coachability beyond the application, I was put in that position. Come in immediately. We want you to meet your potential teammates, and we want you to put your hands in the dough, quite literally, in this guided environment. And I was absolutely hooked. And all the while, they're getting to see how I'm going to be. So I'll kind of stop on my like passion moment with this because I'm a big believer in it. But Chad, love to hear with your, when you guys are looking for coachability, what are some things that y'all do to look for it?
So what I normally do is kind of more towards the personality profile type idea is I actually let them tell me their top 3 areas of opportunity, the areas where they feel they need to grow. And there's very specific words and verbiages that they use to answer those questions or that question that really kind of help me know if they're coachable or if they either 1, think they know it all, or 2, they really don't know, they're super nervous, and they're really skittish about taking on tasks. But I do love your idea.
Absolutely. Good stuff. So looking at our time, I know we're at the 25-minute mark. I know some folks will have a hard stop at the 30-minute mark. So I will jump over the shameless plug about how our software can do a lot of these things in the back end for you. And Chad's already kind of leaned into a few of these things where we're bringing some technology to the interview process to get to where we talk about some of your questions, because I can always make this shameless plug with you some other time. And what I want to do is I saw a couple of questions come in. I think along the way, excuse me. I'll be able to get to some of the things that Sprockets can do to help, but I really want to make this a very practical thing for you guys. So one of the questions that I've seen come in while we were chatting is from Sandy. And Sandy is asking us, and it's relevant to the last slide, how do you detect coachability in the interview process? So for me, this coachability in the way that I look at it across all roles, and now, I'm not just hiring individuals to be on my crew, but I'm hiring individuals to do skill-based positions or, sales positions or, graphic design positions, whatever it will be. Coachability never stops being a thing for me. And what I'm looking for is an inquisitive nature. And then with that, when I respond to the inquisitive nature, when I respond to a question, no matter what the question is, it doesn't even have to be relevant to the job. What I'll do is, of course, give my answer. And I'm listening to myself respond, of course, because it's good to remember what the heck I just said. And then move on from the interview and then come back to it and say, you know what, earlier when you asked me about XYZ, what was your impression about that? What did you think about that? And I know that sounds a little therapist, a little like psychologist kind of thing, like I'm making them sit on the couch, but in just a broad question like that, what do you think? What I should hear back is some critical thinking breakdown of what answer I gave them. I know I'm feeding them the answer, but their response then should be a paraphrasing back of what I've already told them, or a continued breakdown of it, because you might hear then like, oh, well, actually, I was wondering more about, you said this, like, tell me more about that. So then in a real coaching situation, and I'm showing you a process on the line where it's like, hey, I want you to be able to monitor the oven, and you're going to take this stick with a big fork on the end and pop air bubbles as it's coming on through, sort of thing. You got all that? Like, does that make sense to you? When I ask them that later on, like remove them from it, like 10 minutes later, go, hey, by the way, what did you think about the whole process of like popping air bubbles? What did you think about that? That's all. Not like, don't ask anything specific. What did you think? And if you get a one-word answer back, it's like, oh yeah, that's cool, I understand. Then probe a little deeper. Go, well, okay. So what exactly do you think is happening there? Why do you think we do it? Why do you think we do it that way? And then you'll hear, like, if somebody can explain to you the why, or if they say, I don't know, then these are still good things. Like an I don't know is an opportunity for more coaching. But what the clear sign that you've got somebody that's not coachable, and Chad already alluded to this, is the person that knows everything, or worse yet, thinks they know everything, or is too scared to ask. If you don't get the questions, you can't coach. If you don't get the critical thinking back, you can't know that they're breaking down a problem to even be able to ask you questions. So that's one way that I've done it with a lot of success there. And it has nothing to be like, let me read the tea leaves, like, hey, they look like super smart, they were on a roll or something like that. It's all about how somebody approaches the world around them and how they respond to people speaking to them. So I'll stop there. Chad, anything that you'd like to add again to like, how do we detect coachability in an interview process?
I think you pretty much hit it on the head. You explained it very, very well. And that the way that they respond and the way that they answer a question without even a question, it's really, I think that really just says everything.
Perfect. All right. So I got another question here from Joe. How does company culture impact, what is company culture's impact on hiring, and what makes a good culture? One, there's no one good culture out there. I mean, yes, there are things that we know are toxic cultures, but there's no such thing as like, a good culture for you is not necessarily a good culture for me. And what I mean by that is it's a harmonious thing. When you look at teams all operate a little different. And we know this, I know this from a statistical standpoint, from a data standpoint. I know that we've got three locations that are separated by 5 miles in a particular brand, that the success profile to be a cashier at each of those locations, same brand, same job, same area of the country, separated by 5 miles, is fundamentally different, because in operationally going into things with that user, they saw, I got 3 different GMs. I got one person that's been doing it for 30 years. I got another person that's brand spanking new, and another person that's come from multiple different brands, and they all speak differently, interact with their folks differently. So you can be in the same place doing the same thing as everybody else and still be different because of how human beings interact and how they communicate. So there's no one good culture. What I'd say is, what is its impact? Its impact is profound on sourcing and profound on retention. And here's some numbers for you. So and this is where, leaning back into the shameless plug, Sprockets, during the hiring crisis, this is something where during the hiring crisis, we have been put into the Lead Well program with Chick-fil-A, as well as an integration partner with McDonald's operators, franchise operators, in their McHire system, their ATS, solely because of the results operators brought in when hiring for fit using our tool. And what they saw was a 43% increase in employee 90-day retention. And even just a recent brand here, in the first 60 days, a 10% increase in hiring crew members. And this is data from July and August. So hiring for this company culture impact is big, because they were using their employees to benchmark incoming applicants. That's what Sprockets does. So I could tell you, the culture impact is profound on your bottom line for sure. So Joe, I hope that answers your question real quick there. This is our time. I'm getting the shepherd's crook here a little bit and being pulled off the stage. So I'm going to wrap things up. Of course, there is so much around this to provide for folks. We want to provide good user actionable things for you guys beyond just our technology. So if you ever have any questions for me, I'm more than happy to take them personally. My email address is chad@sprockets.ai. You can see my number up here. I'll talk to you personally about what we've seen our users, our independent restaurants out there, our franchise operators out there across the United States, what they've been up to during this time. So I wish I had more time with you, but thank you for your questions. Thank you for your time today. Chad and I both truly appreciate it. Mr. Langston, thank you so much for sharing some of your insights today with the group. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely, anytime.
Great. Thank you both very much. That was a fantastic presentation. Just before we wrap, I want to give a final few housekeeping notes to our attendees. The webinar recording will be sent to you by email for on-demand viewing, and we encourage you to take our short survey so we can continue to provide you with webinar topics that are of interest to you. And if you'd like to learn more about our upcoming events, including conferences and webinars and virtual events, please visit our website at restaurant.org. This concludes today's session. I'd like to give a huge thank you to our friends at Sprockets and Zaxby's for presenting, and thank you to all of you for attending. We look forward to seeing you at future events.